Alsobrooks, and today I'm going to be giving you my Sula character analysis from the book Sula. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the outline of which I'm going to do this process. So first, we're going to talk about a little bit about Sula's background as a person and kind of what the book and Toni Morrison makes her. And then we're going to look at some of her motives and what drives her. Because through the entire book, there's no doubt that Sula is a very unique woman, and we're going to kind of explore the motives and drives of that. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about the relationships that Sula and the book interacts with. That just shows and actually puts into more perspective the kind of person that Sula is. And then lastly, what I want to do is talk about kind of the importance of her birthmark, and where kind of each person has a significant part to the story in ordinance to her birthmark. And then also throughout the presentation, there's going to be some quotes that I just put in that I think are meaningful to the topic we are talking about. So first off, the background. From a very young age, Sula exhibits bravery and power. There's no denying that. And you can see through a lot of traumatic experiences that Sula encounters as a child, through the child dying by the hands of Nell and Sula, and also the horrific death of her mother. We see her kind of get frightened very little by this. And then also I want to point out right from the beginning, you can see the major difference between Sula's background and Nell's. So then we're going to look at some of the motives and drives. So without a doubt, like I said before, Sula is a very unique woman. There is a type of fire and passion within her that makes her pursue what is missing in life. I would argue that her drive is moving away to hope to find what was missing, but then we see through the middle of the book that she doesn't find that thing she's missing. So it resorts to her coming back home. Once again, her motives is finding who she is as a person and make her life meaningful. So this is a quote that I found really interesting. It goes, "I know what every colored woman in this country is doing. What's that? Dying, just like me. But the difference is they are dying like a stump. Me? I'm going down like one of those redwoods. I sure did live in this world." That quote is very powerful to me because I think it signifies Sula's actions and motives and drive as a person all in one quote. So that's why I simply love that quote in the book Sula. Some of the relationships we see are very confusing, and some of them are very intense also. Sula's relationships with each character in the book is easily the most confusing of all the characters, I would like to argue. Without a doubt, the most interesting relationship in the book is the one formed by Sula and Nell. From the point of Sula, I would argue, Nell was a girl who was raised completely different from Sula. We see this from the very beginning in the book. However, most days they would find themselves occupied by each other. Every single day, they would hang out with each other, despite the differences as a family they each had. This brought together many different upbringings, traditions, and values between the two of them. I would like to argue that they would interchange these values, traditions, and upbringings with each other as they hung out every single day, and as they experienced childhood together, and so on and so forth, life. Once again, I talked about this a little before, but traumatic events also bring Sula and Nell closer together, which is interesting because of the way it affects them both differently. I would say Sula is much more seldom, and like I said before, the death of her mother and the child dying really doesn't put a big emphasis on her as it does Nell. So relationships in this book, especially with Sula, are the part of the book that I think it drives most forward. I think Toni Morrison did an incredible job kind of combining the different relationships, the good and the bad, as well as the relationships I'll talk to in a little bit about the people from the bottom, and especially the woman. The relationship between Sula and the woman of the bottom is also very interesting, and I also think crucial to the plot. Sula's affair, as well as the major differences between the traditional woman, caused the woman to describe Sula as a witch who is pure evil. The women, I would like to argue, partly feel jealous of Sula's freedom and longing to live, especially because the way Sula's not afraid to describe the way she wants to live and doesn't feel bad about it simply at all. This, I think, is the most important part of the book, the importance of Sula's birthmark. As you can see in the picture to your right, Sula's birthmark is right above her left eye. I would like to argue that the symbols that show this birthmark are age, maturity, depression, and trauma. Throughout the story, however, the birthmark is perceived differently to many different people. To Sula herself, the birthmark requires the things she is trying not to have in her life, and to everyone around Sula, the birthmark represents what that person formulates through their own story. We've seen many different instances in the book where people like to think of the birthmark as a snake, as a rod, many other things. So I think for Sula herself, the birthmark represents the things she is trying not to have in her life, such as age, maturity, depression, trauma. It's also worth noting that Sula's birthmark gets darker as she gets older, another sign. These symbols is what she's fighting against in her own life, what she's trying to hide from, what she's trying to get away from. But to everyone else, the birthmark represents what that person formulates through their own story. These are my works cited, obviously the book Sula. I would like to thank everyone for listening to this presentation, and I hope you found enjoyment out of it. Thank you so much. Bye.